All right, well, we all know that politicians love to talk about reviving those manufacturing gigs, bringing back Made in America and campaigning on promises to restore an area where this country was once the strongest. But promises are promises, and numbers, well, unfortunately, they're grim. In 2009, the number of unemployed Americans was actually bigger than the total number of people working in manufacturing in this country. And over the past decade, the United States lost an average of 50,000 manufacturing jobs per month. Okay? I mean, is that really something that we can actually turn around? Or are we victims of something more sinister, perhaps just empty political rhetoric? Well, with me to break it all down is Mike Elk. He's a labor journalist and contributing editor for In These Times. Mike, thank you so much for being here.
Good to be on the show, Lucy.
So, I can't imagine what political campaign or rally you can go to where a guy or a lady, I guess, in whatever case it may be, doesn't get up there and says, we're going to bring the jobs back. We're going to restore what makes this country great. But the facts don't really show that those jobs are coming back. Those jobs are going abroad. So where's the disconnect?
Well, I think you can certainly bring those jobs back. It's that the politicians in this country haven't been trying very hard.
Have they been trying?
Quite frankly, I don't think so. I mean, I think what you saw in the last 2 years in this country, President Obama is now trying to pass a South Korea free trade, treaty, which for a country that, is basically doesn't allow goods into its own country. South Korea has such restrictive tariffs. So I don't really think that they have been trying terribly tough to bring back jobs to this country. And it's possible. I mean, you can be in a high-wage country. I mean, the average compensation for, including health care, for a factory worker in this country is $32 an hour. And we have a huge trade deficit. But yet, the average compensation for a factory worker in Germany is $48 an hour, yet they have a trade surplus. And the difference is that they have policies designed to keep jobs in that country and invest the government's money inside of that country.
But why is it that, at least when you look at the rhetoric, it really feels like, I don't know, it's just one of those untouchable issues where a lawmaker cannot go up there and say, you know what, this is a real problem that we have. I can't guarantee you that we can turn this around overnight. We're screwed. Let's move on and see how we can actually make the situation better. It seems that we're stuck in this sort of political la-la land where, it's rah-rah, we'll change the whole system around, and yet the policies that lawmakers pass out of Congress, that we're seeing out of the White House, you mentioned the free trade agreement, they don't match the rhetoric.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is that a lot of these politicians are in bed with the multinational corporations. They've completely sold out. And the other aspect is that we've traded security allies in the war on terror and the war on drugs, or whatever war we're declaring what day of the week.
So many, it's hard to keep track.
Yeah, but we don't have any allies in the war on poverty anymore because we've traded away all the jobs overseas. And, South Korea, that's about gaining an ally against North Korea. Colombia, that's about gaining an ally in South America for the war on drugs. Panama, gaining another ally. Bahrain, the treaty we have with Bahrain, who is, oppressing its government. Its government dissidents. And, we trade these away constantly, and we get nothing in return for it.
Yeah, it seems like we're sort of stuck in this bigger political foreign policy system. But I have to ask, yeah, it's easy to say that the companies are the bad guys or, corrupt politicians aren't being honest, but aren't people like you and I to blame as well? I mean, I don't really want to pay more for this. I'm sure my company doesn't really want to pay a lot more for this fancy TV screen that we have behind us. I mean, we like the cheap crap that we get from China and Vietnam or wherever else. I don't know if Americans are really willing to pay more to keep those jobs, to remove manufacturing into this country.
Well, in some industries like textile, labor costs do make a difference. But in high-tech industries, they don't. For example, in making steel, 1/10 of the cost of making steel, the savings, and making it in China come from labor. The rest come entirely from, subsidies and technology grants and things like that. If you look at Germany, Germany is able to have a very healthy manufacturing base, even despite its workers making more than us, because it has the incentives to keep, jobs in that country and supply, products within that country.
So what has to change in this country in order, what can change? What are the steps that we need to take to ensure that we have those kinds of jobs here that pay fairly while keeping us competitive and not making the price of everything go up to 1,000-fold?
Well, first off, we need to have an industrial policy in this country where the U.S. government buys everything within this country. You look at the U.S. Air Force is having trouble finding goods in this country. We need to have something like that. Second, we need to stop having these crazy free trade treaties with people like South Korea or Colombia, where we just ship jobs overseas and we get nothing in return except an ally in some obscure war. I think those are the things we need to do.
And very briefly, you always hear folks talking about this skilled labor shortage. And I want to ask you for your thoughts on that, because is it really that we're having a skilled labor shortage, or is it that companies in this country aren't really willing to pay fair compensation for their labor? I mean, if I wanted diamonds for $9.99 and I couldn't find any of those, it doesn't mean that there's a diamond shortage. I'm just not willing to pay what diamonds actually cost.
Yeah, I mean, corporations are willing to go overseas because of the cost of labor, also because there's much lower environmental costs. I mean, for example, when GE locates in China, they're able to save a third of its, savings from environmental costs and also from Chinese currency manipulation. Making in China pays for companies. Not because of labor, but because of all these other things. So I don't really think there's a labor cost. I don't think that's the issue. I think this is scapegoating, and it's not really the real issue behind it. We need a comprehensive industrial policy in this country.
Well, and unfortunately, I don't think we can hold our breath for that, especially when you mentioned GE. Jeffrey Immelt, of course, is Obama's BFF and working in the administration now, so we'll see, I guess, how much work they're going to put into changing the status quo. Thank you so much for your time. That was labor journalist Mike Elk.